It was pitch dark when I stepped off the plane. The air was 85 degrees and it enveloped me like a warm blanket. It smelled like wet dirt and burning rubbish. But my heart was thundering in my chest and the tears were streaming down my cheeks. This was the beginning of a dream that was 50 years old. It started when I was 5. In the 1950s, I grew up in the Methodist Church. Missionaries would often come to our church to tell us about dark-skinned children, barefooted, uneducated, and very hungry. Now, for a 5-year-old who had just started school, enjoyed it, and had plenty of food, that seemed like a pretty hopeless life. And then there was every night when my mother would look at me and she would say, "You better eat your dinner because there are starving children in Africa." Well, yeah, you've heard that too. And that just gave me this dream that someday I would go to Africa and I would help those children. In 2004, I was chosen as an emissary to go from the Episcopal Church in Maryland to the Anglican Diocese of Accra. Before I went, I checked out and researched everything that a child would need in Africa. And I solicited 12 suitcases full of school supplies and clothing. This was now a 50-year dream, and I was going to find children. I was going to help them. When I got there, we got in a bus. We drove many, many hours over dirt roads until we got to a village. And it was everything I had expected. There were one-room huts with dirt floors. There were women cooking over open fires. And there were children, a lot of children. In fact, when I stepped off that bus, I was totally surrounded by children. And then I saw her. She's about 7 years old, and the baby on her back is her little sister. She carried her the whole day I was in the village. Now, just imagine taking your weight, cut it in half, take that half, put it in a backpack, strap it to your back, and walk around all day long. Well, this is what it's like for girls. And I learned that girls delay their education until they're 10 or 12 years old because they have to stay home and babysit. And then when they get to school, it's done in English, which is not the local language, particularly in the village. And there are no books, no pencils, no school supplies of any kind. So how are they about to learn? I came back to the States, and all I could think about was this little girl. I went back a year later, and I went back to the same village. When I was in the village, they had just built a preschool. So I went to visit it. 2 rooms, block construction, block floor, no desk, no chairs, no mats, no school books, no toys, not exactly what I thought of as a preschool. However, there were 30 children in each classroom, and they were singing, reciting poems, and having the time of their life. I saw some real hope here. And then I found out that in the public school, the primary school had increased 75% because all those girls who should have been taking care of those babies were now going to school. And that was enough to ignite a fire in my heart. I decided to start a nonprofit. I looked at the Millennium Development Goals and chose a few goals of my own. Address hunger, provide education, and empower girls. I put together a Ghanaian board and a US board, and together we collaborated and created a preschool that would serve a nutritious meal. It would educate those younger kids in English so they wouldn't be frustrated when they went to school, and it would empower the older girls to go to school. A year later, that school was up and running, and it was very exciting to see. Even in seemingly hopeless places, full bellies, education, and empowering actions will give power to the powerless. For the last 9 years, I have watched as volunteers on both sides of the ocean have given of time, talent, and treasure in order to empower others. Victoria, every day for 2 weeks, strapped her brand new newborn baby on her back. She would climb on the back of a motorcycle driven by a friend, and off they would go for a 45-minute ride over those wonderful roads I told you about earlier until she arrived at a Cramaman school. She is actually a caterer. She should be home doing her catering business, but instead, she wanted to do something. She wanted to give back. So she did what she does best. She cooks. She would get to the school, unload the baby to somebody else, pick up her paddle, and just begin stirring the rice. She was having to feed 150 children and teachers for the day. But the best part about Victoria was at the end of the day, she made sure there were enough leftovers for 30 or 40 other children. Those children that come to the school every day, they're not part of the program, but they're just looking for something. And Victoria knew about that. She used to be one of those children, so she was giving back. Dr. Seuss says, the more you read, the more you'll know. The more you learn, the more places you will go. A couple of years ago, a group in Maryland decided to collect books at the end of the school year. You know those books that are discarded by all the schools? So they were collecting books from grades 1 to grade 3. It turned out to be 500 cases of books from one county school system. They sorted them out, and 300 of them were able to go to Africa with me, and the other 200 went to Appalachia. When I got to Ghana and I opened the book to show the teacher, look, we have these for you, right on the front, big stamp, discarded. And they all looked in horror, finally asking me, who would discard a perfectly good book? Well, I didn't have the heart to tell them more than 1 million books are discarded every year from our school systems. What could we do with those? Anita was only 5 years old when she came to our first reading camp, and she could barely recognize her letters. But after the end of the week, she was feeling a little more comfortable, so we gave her 3 books, sent her home, and said, I want you to read these, learn your letters, and then see how we go. The second year, she comes back. She not only knew her letters, but she could say, is, the, look. She could recognize some of those little words. And that was pretty exciting because her teacher, Zach, had seen her the year before and this year. We gave her 5 books that year, said, take them home, share them with your friends, share them with your mother. Just read. She came back that next year for her 3rd year, and the teacher, Zach, could see that she was actually tracking as he was reading, and she was mouthing the words. So he did what all good teachers would do and said, Anita, why don't you read the next 2 pages? And Anita went, She was frozen, but he encouraged her. Anita, you can do this. And she stood up and she read 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. And the first thing you know, she was actually reading with ease. And she realized she could read. So every day at recess, she grabbed a couple of books, a couple of other kids, and she played teacher. At the end of the week, she came right up to me and said, I'm going to be a teacher. Wow, that's what empowering can do. I met Adriana when she was 14 years old. She had been invited by Zach, her school teacher, to come to Africa and teach at a reading camp. Well, that's a pretty exciting thing for a 14-year-old from Virginia Beach. And she gathered the money that she needed. She gave up the time with her family. She did the shots that you have to go. She did the 21-hour plane flight, got sick on the plane, the whole bit. But when she got in the village, she was super excited, and she did a fantastic job. In fact, so fantastic, the girls clung to her legs at the end of the week. And just kept begging her, come back, come back, come back. And of course, we knew we were leaving. But she promised she'd come back. And she did the same thing the following year. She goes back, and the minute she gets there, she runs over and scoops up one of those 40 little extra kids I told you about. And she brings her over to me, and she says, I want to help her. What can I do? I'm going, well, I don't get that from a 15-year-old usually. So, okay, well, you know, here's what you have to do, but it's a commitment. For the last year and a half, Adriana has committed 40% of her allowance to empower Emanuela, to become the girl that Emanuela can really become. I don't have all the answers for Africa, Ghana, or any place else, but there are things that I do know. I've learned that actions will eradicate poverty and hunger. They will provide education for all children. They will provide gender equality and empower girls. The thing I've learned most of all is that the dreams of a 5-year-old really do come true. When was the last time you visited yours? Thank you.